When Emma and Jack finally became parents, their house was filled with the kind of joy you can almost touch. It was a home brimming with laughter, dreams, and one very curious little soul, a white parrot named Snow. Snow had been part of their family for 3 years. He was a character, a feathered comedian who talked, whistled, and sang along, often off-key, to whatever was playing on the radio. He was the soundtrack to their quiet suburban life. But when baby Noah arrived, wrapped in soft blue blankets and smelling of milk and new beginnings, Snow grew quiet. His usual chatter faded into a watchful silence. He would perch by the window, his white feathers glowing in the morning light, and just watch. It was as if he understood, in that mysterious way animals do, that something incredibly precious had just entered their world. He wasn't just a pet anymore. He was a spectator to a miracle. The days that followed settled into a new, wonderful rhythm. It was a beautiful chaos of feeding times, diaper changes, and sleepless nights. And through it all, Snow was there, a silent but constant presence. Every morning, the very instant Noah let out his first cry, Snow would break his silence. "Hello, hello." He'd call out, his voice a clear, sharp signal. It was his own little alarm system, as if he were telling Emma, "Hey, your tiny human is awake again." Emma would walk into the nursery, still sleepy but with a smile on her face. "I see you, little babysitter," she'd say, ruffling his feathers. "Thank you, Snow." The parrot became an integral part of their daily routine. He'd let out a soft, happy whistle whenever Noah giggled. He'd squawk with concern when the baby cried, his feathers ruffling in agitation. And sometimes, he would just sit quietly near the crib for hours, simply guarding him. He'd fly gentle laps around the nursery, his wings making a soft whooshing sound, before landing near the crib like a feathered angel, standing watch. The bond between the tiny baby and the little bird grew deeper with each passing day. It was a silent conversation, a language of the heart that only they seemed to understand. When Noah would burst into a fit of giggles, Snow would mimic the sound perfectly, a tiny, joyful echo. When Noah slept, his chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm, Snow would become as still as a statue, his bright eyes fixed on the crib. He was a sentinel, a guardian. Jack would often find them like this, and he'd pull out his phone to capture the moment, his own laughter filling the room. "I swear," he'd say to Emma, "this bird loves him more than we do." And watching them together, it was hard to argue. Maybe, just maybe, he did. Snow's love wasn't loud or demanding. It was a quiet, unwavering devotion that had wrapped itself around the newest member of their family. One evening, the weather turned. The sky darkened and a fierce wind began to rattle the windows. The gentle pitter-patter of rain quickly escalated into a torrential downpour. The family sat together in the living room, the cozy atmosphere now tinged with a slight unease from the storm raging outside. "It's getting worse," Emma said, her voice laced with concern. "I'll put Noah to bed early." She carried the sleeping baby to his room upstairs, kissed his forehead, and tucked him into his crib. For a bit of soft light, she left a small candle burning on a nearby knitstand, its flame flickering gently. As the night wore on, the storm roared with a furious intensity. And then, with a sudden clap of thunder, the power went out, plunging the entire house into an unnerving darkness and silence. At that very moment, a powerful gust of wind burst through a window that had been left slightly ajar. The force of it tipped over the candle. The small flame touched the edge of the curtain, and in an instant, a fire began to catch. Snow saw it first. His quiet vigil was shattered by the sight of the growing flames. Panic seized him, and he began to fly frantically around the room, flapping his wings and squawking with a desperate, piercing cry. "Help! Help! Baby! Baby!" he shrieked, his voice filled with a terror that was impossible to ignore. Downstairs, Emma was jolted awake by the bird's frantic screams. It wasn't his usual hello or a playful whistle. This was a sound of pure alarm. She leaped out of bed and ran upstairs, her heart pounding in her chest. By the time she reached Noah's room, thick, acrid smoke already filled the air. And through the haze, she could see Snow still screaming, relentlessly trying to pull at the baby's blanket with his beak, trying to wake him, to move him, to save him. Without a second's hesitation, Emma rushed in, grabbed Noah, and ran out of the burning room. Jack was right behind her, using a heavy blanket to smother the flames before they could spread. They were safe. The family was safe. But the little hero was not. Snow had inhaled too much smoke. He lay weak and still on the floor, his once pristine white feathers now darkened with soot. The next morning, an eerie quiet had settled over the house. The storm had passed, but it had left a different kind of wreckage behind. Emma sat on the floor near Snow's small open cage, her eyes filled with tears that traced silent paths down her cheeks. The little parrot lay inside, his breathing shallow and faint. "You saved him, Snow," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You saved our baby." She reached in and gently, so gently, touched his feathers, her fingers trembling. "Our little hero?" Snow, as if gathering his last ounce of strength, took one last, shallow breath. And then his bright, intelligent eyes closed for the final time. The little feathered angel had finished his watch. The silence he left behind was heavier than any storm. Time passed. Months went by. The house was repaired. The smell of smoke faded, and life slowly returned to a new normal. The deep wounds of loss began to heal, scarring over into memories that were both painful and beautiful. Noah was bigger now, crawling on the floor, his laughter once again filling the rooms. But sometimes, in the quiet moments of the afternoon, when Noah would let out a particularly loud, joyful laugh, a soft, faint sound would seem to echo from the corner of the room, from the old, now empty perch by the window. "Hello, hello." It would whisper like a phantom on the breeze. Maybe it was just the wind whistling through the trees outside. Or maybe, just maybe, it was a reminder that love never really leaves. Some angels, after all, have feathers.